Hey everyone, welcome to the very first edition of LandOpt's new podcast that we call FieldCast. And we call it FieldCast because in every episode we're going to go out into the field and talk with some of the top landscape contractors across the country, some of the industry's best suppliers, as well as other experts, all with the idea of helping contractors be more successful and make more money. And for our initial episode, we are so pleased to have Dan Eichenlaub with us. 50-year veteran of the landscape contract business, immensely successful in the Pittsburgh market, and to boot, he also happens to be a LandOpt founder. So, Dan, welcome to FieldCast. We are so grateful that you're here. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the landscape contract business, just to begin with.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for having me here. My brothers and I have 5 brothers, and in 1972, a hurricane called Agnes, which is well published, came up from the Gulf, and it rained for a week in Pittsburgh, and then the wind blew and the trees all fell over. This was in late June, and we realized that if my brothers and I worked together, this was a way we might be able to earn enough money to pay our way through college. And so that was the very humble beginnings. I went to school. I'm an architectural engineer, graduated, built buildings, and then when the company I worked for decided they were going to leave the construction market, I decided to come back with this landscape business and build it into what I have today.
So, but what is it about building things outdoors? And you told me it might possibly be genetic. I don't know if that's true.
Well, my name, Eichenlaub, Eichen means oak and Laub means leaf in German. So I don't know what the history is back there, but I think I love the soil. I probably would have been a farmer if I thought I could have made it. So I think that's my tie to the landscape side. And I just always like building things. I don't care whether it's outdoor kitchens or it was buildings. And so when I realized that there was an opportunity here in the green industry to really make a difference, that's what really attracted me to do that. Because with my education, I think I had a little advantage over the average landscape contractor of that day. Yeah. Now today's a whole different story because there's lots of great landscape contracting programs out there, and that's where LandOpt has come along, and we'll talk about that, but how LandOpt's really helped us propel us to even a higher level than I ever dreamed possible.
Okay, so let's fast forward 50 years now.
Okay.
Eichenlaub today compared to Eichenlaub back then.
So in 1980, when I came back to the business, I don't know what our revenue was. Small business still, started to build. But then about 18 years ago, a group came together that said, we need to take this cottage industry and use business management processes to really make them function way easier, way better, bring more money to the bottom line, and have the owners have a life. And so when we then, that group, we created LandOpt, and I began to implement those programs. It made a world difference in how Eichenlaub progressed. So that was about 17 years ago. I was already in the high-end residential. So initially, Eichenlaub started into, in the early 80s, steel was dying in Pittsburgh. So we did all the big commercial work. We did Fortune 500 campuses and things like that. But later on in my career, I realized that the high-end residential market was not being well served. I was kind of tired of dealing with some of the GCs and all the stuff that they did. And so I took my team and we migrated to high-end residential. And then a few years later, LandOpt came along and really taught us how to do it functionally very well. And that was the beginning of really just explosion of what we're accomplishing today. So your original question was, what were we doing? When LandOpt came, doing about $2.5 million, today we'll do over $10 million in revenue. And I'm working on the business, not in it, which is the part I love.
How has your focus changed over the years? What are you doing in terms of your client base today versus 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Well, from a client base standpoint, one of the things that LandOpt did very early is, one, who is your clients and how do you hunt them? So it was no longer waiting for the phone to ring. The goal was to go out there and hunt the people that are going to want to buy your services. And that was probably the big initial change. So then as we began to find the customers that we really should have had, then we could charge them what we really should have been charging, which then means we could do all the other good stuff we wanted to do.
So today your focus is what? Strictly high-end residential?
Yes. More than 80% of our revenues come from single-family dwellings. I say that because we have residential that are not single-family dwellings, but more than 80% of our revenue comes from that high-end residential customer, and our focus is very broad-based. So we design, build, and maintain, and in the build and maintain side, we're doing everything from not just the plants, but all the hardscapes. We got stonemasons and carpenters and water feature people and irrigation and lighting. And so we can build it all and we can maintain it all. And that's the differentiating factor in the brand that Eichenlaub brings to the Pittsburgh market.
Talk about how you grew your team over the years. You just don't go from a couple $1 million to $10 or $12 million and expand that quickly. You had a very strategic approach to bringing people on board. Yeah. I think contractors would like to hear how you did that.
Yeah, and that was a big part of what LandOpt tried to do. Was when LandOpt came in, and of course they tell us, go find the right customer. Well, then they're going to begin to tell us, here's how you're going to deliver that right customer's work. And so what LandOpt does is they have all these roles that a company might need. So an estimator, a salesperson, a designer. Well, when they first came to Eichenlaub, we didn't have enough volume of work to support 3 people. So one person wore 3 hats. As Eichenlaub grew, then that person that was wearing 3 hats then began to wear 2 and then began to wear 1. Now we're big enough. We have people that are focused just on design. We have people that are just focused on sales. We have people that are just focused on the estimating part. So, and that's the same thing in the operations area. You might have had a manager managing both projects and maintenance. And then as we grew, had divided that, and now we have 4 project managers and we have 4 account managers that manage the sheer volume of work that we're doing. So that was really exciting because as you begin to, LandOpt really help these people focus on what their goal really was and help guide us on, here's how you need to empower them. Don't try to do their job for them. Teach them how to do their job and empower them to make the decisions to do what they need to do. And that's been a game changer. That's how I got from, working 16-hour days to working 12 and then working 10, because I had people I could trust in roles, and they did a better job at those roles than I ever did. And that just helped Eichenlaub begin to flourish to the point today where if I'm not here tomorrow, I know that company's going to be here for another 25 years.
Yeah. Let's talk about how LandOpt came to be. You were a part of that first core group. You are still chairman of the board. How did all that happen? Because there's really no other organization out there in the landscape contract industry that is like LandOpt.
Yeah. So I'm an anal engineer. I like systems and processes, but a small landscape company could never afford to build those process and systems on their own. Another gentleman on our board, George, went off to visit a professor who runs the landscape contracting program at Penn State, or did run the landscape contracting program at Penn State. And they had a meeting, and George has had a history of service industries. He really was a student of them. He learned how they worked. He learned how to make them efficient. And so towards the end of his career, he wanted to do one more cottage industry to manage process systems, and he saw that landscape was growing at 3 times the national economy. So he went and visited my friend Dan at Penn State, and they ended up spending the whole day together. In fact, the professor said, George, would you initial my calendar because I want to remember this day because this is what this industry needs. And so they talked the whole day. They're all excited, and as George is ready to leave the door, and he knows George is from Pittsburgh, he turns to George and says, I know a contractor in Pittsburgh that would love to be a guinea pig in this process. And that's how Dan Eichenlaub came into the picture. So the next thing you know, George is standing on my doorstep talking to me about this very same thing. We got 2 other people in addition to Dan Stearns, and George threw some money in the pie, studied to see if this could be real, realized it could be, and that was the birth of LandOpt. Then we went out and got other investors to help fund building all the process and systems that we now bring to contractors to use. And we've continued to refine them over the years too. But initially we had to get the basic tools off the drawing table and into practice. And Eichenlaub was one of the contractors that got to test drive a lot of that early systems. So,
well, apparently that test drive went pretty well. Here we are all these years later, and look at the growth of your company.
It's a game changer because really, when we finally developed these systems, they said, okay, we need to have a plan about how we're going to implement this. There's lots of things that need to be improved or that you're going to want to improve. You can't do them all on day one. So they really helped set out a plan and said, okay, let's figure out who your customers are and how you're going to hunt them. Okay, you need staff to do it. Let's figure out what those roles are, what roles you're going to combine together into a single individual. And we're going to help you figure out which person fits in what seat on the bus so that you're not trying to put a sales type person in a production role where they don't fit. So those are the kind of initial things that really began to change things. And it was amazing. In about 3 years, I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. And that just fueled our interest to even apply more. And then in addition to what LandOpt was bringing us, we have these relationships with all these other contractors. So we go around to meetings where we share best practices and things like that. So LandOpt's giving us all this knowledge, and then we're learning from each other as well.
Okay. What do you see as the biggest difference between LandOpt and other companies and consultants out there who have the same goal of helping contractors be more successful, but your approach is a little bit different?
Right. I think the biggest thing, that LandOpt's really not a consultant. It's not like, oh, here's what you should do, goodbye, we'll come back in 6 months and see if you've done it. They're holding your hand the whole way along. They've already seen contractors, why does it fail, why does it work, and they know pretty quickly who's going to help implement, and they'll even teach the owner, how do you find the disciples in your organization that are going to help carry this forward. And some people leave a company, they just say, you know what, I don't want to be held accountable or whatever, but you begin to find those team members you're going to really start to build with, and that's where the excitement. You have other people that want it as bad as you do, and then you begin to build a business. And then they also help, you know, it's great to have people help you build something. You better take care of them. You better compensate them, keep them, get benefits for them or whatever. But that's the beauty, is if I'm getting the right customer and I'm charging the right price, I now have the money to pay people what they really deserve, give them the right benefits. And then on top of that, the beauty is I get to have satisfied employees and customers who are like blown away at what you're delivering. So everybody's winning, and we all like to be part of a winning team. So that's just really been the game changer for Eichenlaub over those 17 years.
I know it's a tough question to answer, but if you had to identify one piece of advice to that contractor who's maybe $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million, who aspires to be an Eichenlaub, what would that be?
I think beyond the process and systems, you just have to learn. I don't care what business you are, you always have them. LandOpt brings some flavor to that, but it's the people. It's all about the people. You know, you can have the best systems in the world, but if you don't have anybody to operate them, you're not going to win the game. It's like buying a car and nobody can drive it. So the key is LandOpt helped us learn how to find people, how to give them a proper role that they should be in, make sure we know how to compensate them, and then challenge them to deliver. And it's been awesome. So it's really changing the people, and changing the people is then what changed my life, because no longer did I wear every hat. I had people, because LandOpt taught me how to give them a charge and trust them, then I could do other things and help grow the business too. So everybody's doing their part, and that's where then we never looked back in the rearview mirror. I mean, we were just going forward every day.
Well, speaking of the rearview mirror, you have seen plenty of economic downturns in your years in the business. There's talk of a recession. We may be in one. I'm hearing some contractors saying, I think we're already starting to see maybe some cutback in spending. What's your take on what a strategy should be? What have you learned from the ups and downs of the economy?
I think a big part in this, is somebody new to LandOpt, it'll take them a few years before they can realize this, but LandOpt has this financial planning tool. And when the Great Recession hit in 2009, that financial planning tool, if I didn't believe in it, I believed in it after 2009, because it really taught me what levers am I going to pull, because we lost 25% of our project revenue. How am I going to cover this overhead? So it gave me tools to say, how do I convert overhead to production so I could stay in business? So that was really important. But the other thing I learned from that, and again, we're in the high-end residential area, which is a little different than people in the commercial. The high-end residential area, the recession cycles are way shorter. So in March, the stock market dropped substantially, and by September, our customers are back buying them. As soon as the residential customers realized the market had hit a bottom, they were back out there buying it. Not as robustly as before, but they were back out there buying. And I knew then for sure that I wanted to continue to stay in the high-end residential, because in the commercial world, it could be 2 or 3 years to weather recession, where in the residential segment, I find those people start buying they can't do without, so they buy very quickly again. So I've been very blessed. And then the other thing is, when steel died in Pittsburgh in the 1980s, it took us about 30 years to recover from that. And so as a result, we recovered with what drives our economy in Pittsburgh. We don't have the highs or the lows that the national economy have. So even if we have a recession, our recession will be weaker, but our highs won't be as high either. And so I'm just in the perfect place to help me succeed. And there are many other cities like that, but I know the story of Pittsburgh, and that's what LandOpt taught me how to study. So I'm prepared for the next recession, not hoping it won't be bad, but knowing what am I going to do when it begins to hit, just like we're dealing with inflation now. They're teaching me, are you doing this to handle inflation? Are you doing this to handle supply chain? When COVID hit, they taught us how to all get PPP money. So it's having this team of people besides me helping me to achieve these goals when there are things that are out of our control that we can't control, whether it be recession, COVID, whatever. It's nice to have a team around you helping you figure it out.
And I'm guessing you've made some pretty good friends along the way?
Oh, lifelong friends, for sure.
Yeah.
And lifelong friends. What can I say? We talk all the time. We know each other's kids. It's awesome, you know.
Right.
So, and, you know, sometimes they say it's lonely at the top because you don't want to take every challenge you have maybe to your team. So it's nice when you can call a fellow LandOpt licensee, another contractor, and say, hey, I'm facing this challenge today. Tell me what the hell do you do when this happens to you? And even though we may already know the answer, it's just nice to have somebody reconfirm, here's what you're going to do. So it's really helpful sometimes when you have one of those rough days to go do it, because it's not all plums and roses, but it's damn near that, you know, so.
Well, it's amazing to see your enthusiasm still for your business and the industry after all these years, especially as challenging as it's been. Any other final words of wisdom to share with that next generation of contractor?
The landscape company that I started will never be my grandfather's type of landscape. This industry is changing by leaps and bounds, technology. I mean, we're an old industry. Landscape's been in the United States since it came through Philadelphia in 1600s. But today, this industry is way different. There's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of opportunity. If you keep doing things like you did them yesterday, you're going to be left in the dust. You got to keep improving. And that's where, like an old dog like me, we counsel these younger people that can work technology 10 times better than I can. I just have to know enough to lead them, but they really know how to do it. And that's really what's been exciting. And again, LandOpt has helped me track to so many wonderful people. I love going to work every day. I love those people I work with. And I think most of them love working for my organization. So it's a win-win.
Well, we are so honored that you are our first guest on the FieldCast. Thank you for spending time with us. Thanks for all that you do for the landscape contracting industry and especially for LandOpt.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been wonderful.
Dan, thanks again.
Okay, great.
And we will see you on the next episode of the FieldCast.